Snow White by Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, in the middle of winter, when snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky, a queen sat at her window, which had a frame of black ebony wood, and she was sewing. As she sewed and looked out at the snow, she pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell on the snow. The red on the white looked so beautiful that she thought, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of this frame. Soon after, the queen gave birth to a baby girl who had skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. She named her Snow White. Sadly, the queen died shortly after giving birth. The king remarried, and his new queen was beautiful but very proud and cruel. She had a magic mirror, and every day she would ask it, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White is even fairer than you." The queen was enraged with jealousy. She could not bear the thought that someone else was more beautiful than her. So she called for a huntsman and ordered him to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. She demanded that he bring back Snow White's heart as proof. The huntsman led Snow White into the forest, but as he drew his knife to kill her, she began to weep. "Please spare my life," she begged. "I will run away into the wild forest and never return." The huntsman took pity on Snow White. He let her go and brought back the heart of a wild animal instead, which he presented to the wicked queen. Snow White ran through the forest in terror. She was so frightened that she did not know where to go. As evening approached, she came upon a little house and went inside to rest. Inside the house, everything was small but neat and orderly. There was a little table with 7 little plates, 7 little cups, and 7 little chairs. Against the wall stood 7 little beds, all in a row and covered with white sheets. Snow White was so hungry and tired that she ate a little from each plate and drank a little from each cup. Then she lay down on one of the beds and fell asleep. Soon after, the owners of the house returned. There were 7 dwarfs who mined for gold in the mountains. When they entered the house, they saw that someone had been there. "Who has been sitting in my chair?" asked the first dwarf. "Who has been eating from my plate?" asked the second. "Who has been drinking from my cup?" asked the third. "Who has been eating my bread?" asked the fourth. "Who has been eating my vegetables?" asked the fifth. "Who has been using my fork?" asked the sixth. "Who has been cutting with my knife?" asked the seventh. Then the 7th dwarf noticed Snow White sleeping in one of the beds. "Look," he said, "there is a girl lying in one of our beds." The 7 dwarfs gathered around Snow White, marveling at her beauty. They decided not to wake her and let her sleep. The next morning, Snow White woke up and was frightened to see the 7 dwarfs, but they were kind and asked her name. "My name is Snow White," she replied. The dwarfs listened as Snow White told them her story. They felt sorry for her and offered her a place to stay if she would keep the house in order, cook, clean, and sew for them. Snow White gladly agreed. Meanwhile, the wicked queen asked her magic mirror once again, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White, beyond the mountains, with the 7 dwarfs, is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen was furious. She realized that the huntsman had deceived her and that Snow White was still alive. She decided to kill Snow White herself, Disguising herself as an old peddler woman, she traveled to the dwarf's cottage and knocked on the door. "Good day, my dear," she said to Snow White. "Would you like to buy some fine laces?" Snow White, not suspecting any danger, allowed the old woman in and bought some laces. The wicked queen offered to lace Snow White's bodice for her, and as she pulled the laces tighter and tighter, Snow White could not breathe and fell down as if dead. The queen left, thinking her plan had succeeded. However, the dwarfs returned just in time and cut the laces, reviving Snow White. When she awoke, she told them what had happened, and they warned her to be wary of strangers. The queen, back at the castle, asked her mirror again, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White beyond the mountains, with the 7 dwarfs, is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen was livid. She disguised herself again, this time as an old woman selling combs. She traveled to the dwarf's cottage and offered Snow White a beautiful comb. Snow White hesitated, but eventually allowed the woman to comb her hair. The comb was poisoned, and as soon as it touched Snow White's head, she fell to the ground unconscious. Again, the dwarfs arrived just in time to save her. They removed the comb, and Snow White awoke and told them what had happened. The dwarfs warned her once more to be cautious. The queen returned to her castle and asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White beyond the mountains, with the 7 dwarfs, is 1,000 times fairer than you." In a final fit of rage, the queen prepared a poisoned apple. Disguised as a farmer's wife, she traveled to the dwarf's cottage. This time, she offered Snow White the apple. "This is no ordinary apple," she said. "Take a bite, and all your dreams will come true." Snow White hesitated, but was eventually tempted by the beautiful apple. She took a bite and immediately fell into a deep sleep. This time, the dwarfs could not revive her. They placed her in a glass coffin and kept watch over her, mourning their beloved friend. Years passed, and one day, a prince traveling through the forest came upon the glass coffin. He was captivated by Snow White's beauty and asked the dwarfs if he could take her to his castle. The dwarfs agreed, and as the prince's servants carried the coffin, they stumbled, dislodging the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. She awoke, to everyone's astonishment. The prince declared his love for Snow White, and she agreed to marry him. They invited the dwarfs to their wedding, and everyone celebrated joyously. The wicked queen, upon learning that Snow White was still alive and now a queen, was so consumed by rage that she destroyed her own magic mirror and fled the kingdom. Snow White and her prince lived happily ever after, and the 7 dwarfs visited them often, cherishing the bond they had formed. The tale of Snow White's bravery and kindness was told for generations, inspiring many with its lessons of love, friendship, and the triumph of good over evil. If you enjoyed this story, when you awaken, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more magical tales. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an adventure. Sweet dreams, and see you in the next story.